I guess that brings me to the question, because there's two common criticisms I hear of Brazil's agro market, particularly from like geopolitical analysts that aren't specialized in Brazil the way you are. And for me, it's obvious that the first one is that Brazil's infrastructure and geography are suboptimal. I think that's just obviously false, because if you look at what they're exporting and how they've grown their exports, at what point is that going to matter, right? So I'll ask you about that one. But then the other one that I don't know how to respond to is that Brazil needs to import fertilizers, and without these imports, the industry collapses. I don't know if you could take those one by one and let me know what you think.
Sure. Again, I think about it this way. I'm going to use basketball as an analogy.
Do it.
When Michael Jordan was at the top of his game, the higher you go, the more people are trying to knock you down, right? The more people are trying to find holes in your game or holes in your personal life or holes wherever they can find to bring you down. Unfortunately, that's human nature, right? And those arguments, I'll say this to you. Is there some truth to the arguments? Sure. Brazilian infrastructure, for instance, number one, right? It's far from ideal, meaning we still rely too much on trucking, right? When you go to Brazil, for instance, doing harvest, you drive through what we call the BR-163, which is a highway, which is basically the BR-163 is the main artery of Brazilian agriculture. It goes right through the middle of the main producing state in Brazil, which is Mato Grosso. And you can get caught in lines of trucks, semi-trucks, full of soybeans, corn, etc., cotton, whatever it may be, for hours, right? The infrastructure could be better, but that is a work in progress. But then you hit the nail in the head. It's just because it is not ideal, it doesn't mean that Brazil doesn't get the job done. And I have a slide that I show during my presentations when I go overseas, speaking about this exact point. I say, listen, if you know Brazilians and if you know Brazil is a country where things work, even when they're not supposed to work.
I thought you were going to say,
Brazil's the country. No, and that's exactly what I have. De jeitinho brasileiro. Yeah. I have actually a slide with a tic-tac-toe game. It basically shows you don't really have a straight cross, but Brazilians kind of like, they kind of find a way. They do a jeitinho brasileiro. And the point is that jeitinho brasileiro, which is the Brazilian way, there's a positive and there's a negative connotation to that. But it's because, again, going back to what I said earlier, that Brazilians grow up having to come up with things last minute solutions to issues that many other countries, developed countries, definitely don't have, right? So you kind of learn to fight your way through things. Is the infrastructure where we believe it should be? No, there's still a lot of, just if we depend on trucking, we need to expand the roads, we need to do this, we need to do that. But I'll tell you something right now, there's also the other side to this. You look at something that we call the Northern Arc, which is basically a group of ports in northern Brazil that 10 years ago had very little relevance in agricultural exports. And now over 50% of the corn that's exported goes out through there, and around 35% of the soybeans exported goes out through the north. Where 10 years ago, those percentages were less than 10%. And right? So again, the improvements are happening, but it takes time.
And those northern ports, to hit on the geography point again, those northern ports are growing their export share because they're positioned in a way that those shipping routes make the product more competitive. Is that right?
Absolutely. More competitive. It cuts the time, and it's more competitive both for the exporter to get it out of there, right? Yep. So the buyers buy at a cheaper price, and depending on where they are, right? But also the farmers have much less cost transporting the farmers or the exporter, depending on how you do the contract, taking this to the ports, right? So utilizing the internal infrastructure or some of the rivers that they have up north, right? So you still got to go, I don't know, you still have to go about 1,000 kilometers to the closest riverbed that can take the barges. But now, instead of going 2,500 kilometers down to Santos or Paranaguá, you go about 1,000 kilometers to the riverside, right? So you get there, you put it in barges, and the barges take it up to the northern ports, and then you're good to go.
The second half is more affordable. The river barges, it's more affordable. Right? That's interesting.